I want to say up front that I've told this story to maybe 4 people in the 2 years since it happened, and every single one of them gave me the same explanation. A clerical error, a lazy leasing office, a weird coincidence that snowballed in my head because I was stressed about the move. I used to believe that too. I don't anymore. And by the end of this, you'll understand why, but I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm just going to tell you what happened, in order, the way it happened to me. In March of that year, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building called the Aldridge, on the east side of the city. 6-month lease, month to month after that. Standard stuff. The unit was 3C. I remember the number because it was stenciled on a little brass plate on the door, the kind that's been there since the building went up, decades old, slightly green at the edges. The move-in itself was unremarkable. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters that nothing was wrong on day 1. The apartment was clean, freshly painted. The carpet still had those little indentations from where furniture used to sit, but that's true of every rental on earth. I unpacked over a weekend, hung some pictures, put my mattress against the far wall under the window. Normal moving in stuff. The first thing I noticed was small enough that I didn't think about it for almost 2 weeks. On my 3rd day there, I got mail. Not my mail, a phone bill addressed to someone named Daniel Ferris at my address, Unit 3C. I figured it was routine. Forwarding takes time. People forget to update their address. I set it on the counter, meaning to write return to sender on it and drop it back in the mailbox downstairs. Except then it happened again the next day. A card from a credit union, then a package slip from a delivery service, the kind that gets left when nobody's home to sign. All addressed to Daniel Ferris, Unit 3C, my apartment. I asked the leasing office about it on a Tuesday afternoon. The woman at the desk, her name tag said Priya, pulled up the unit on her computer, and I watched her expression do something I didn't like. Not alarm, exactly. More like she'd been asked a question she'd been half expecting and hoping not to get. She told me the previous tenant had not formally vacated. That was the phrase she used, not formally vacated. I asked what that meant because to me there's really only 2 options. Someone lives somewhere or they don't. And she said the lease had lapsed, the tenant had stopped paying, and the unit had been relisted and re-rented to me once the standard vacancy procedure was completed. She said this like she was reading it off a card, which I'd realized much later she basically was. I didn't think much more about it that week. Mail keeps coming to old addresses. That's just a fact of modern life. I forwarded a few things, tossed the rest, moved on with settling in. The key thing changed on a Thursday night, about 3 weeks in. I came home a little after 11. I worked closing shifts at the time, and there was a padded manila envelope wedged into my door, the kind you'd get from a locksmith or a property manager. Inside was a single brass key, no note, no explanation, just the key, and on the little plastic fob attached to it, someone had written in blue ballpoint the number 3C. I already had a key to 3C. This was the second one. I want to walk you through my thought process here because I think it's important, because at the time I genuinely did not think anything sinister was happening. My first thought was that maintenance had cut a spare and left it at the wrong door. 3C could easily get confused with 3B or 2C in a hurry. My second thought, a little less charitable, was that maybe this had something to do with Daniel Ferris. Maybe someone was trying to get him a key, thinking he still lived here. I brought both keys down to the office the next day. Priya wasn't there. A man named Gary was. Older guy. Been there longer. Had that manner people get after 20 years in property management, where nothing surprises them anymore. So I showed him the second key, told him about the envelope. He turned it over in his hand for a second, and then he said something that I've replayed more times than I can count. He said that this isn't one of ours. I asked what he meant. He said the building used a specific kind of blank for all their keys. You could tell by the shoulder shape, some detail about the cut that I don't fully understand and that he explained too fast for me to follow. And this key wasn't cut on that blank. It was a generic hardware store blank. Somebody had it cut somewhere else, off-site, and it worked in my lock. He tested it right there at his own office door just to see the shape, and it clearly did not match. Then, almost as an afterthought, he tried it against a master lock they kept in a drawer. For training purposes, a lock that used the same core as most of the units on my floor, and it turned. He gave it back to me. He told me to keep both keys and to consider rekeying the lock myself if it made me feel better, and that the building would reimburse the locksmith fee. I remember thinking that was a strange offer for something he was treating as no big deal. I didn't rekey it that week. I want to be honest about that because I think about it a lot. I was busy, I was tired, and some part of me, the part that wanted this to be nothing, decided it could wait. 4 nights later, I woke up a little after 2 a.m. to the specific, unmistakable sound of a key sliding into my front door lock. Not a knock, not someone testing a doorknob. The distinct mechanical rasp of a key entering a cylinder, followed by the tumbler, starting to turn and then stopping, just short of turning all the way. I lay there in the dark for what felt like an extremely long time. Listening, I heard it retract. I heard footsteps, unhurried, almost casual move away down the hallway. Not running. Walking. Like someone who had somewhere to be and wasn't in a rush to get there. I did not open my door. I did not look through the peephole. I lay in bed with my phone in my hand, not calling anyone, just holding it until it started getting light outside. In the morning, I finally did what I should have done days earlier and called a locksmith myself, paid out of pocket, had the whole lock swapped by 10 a.m. I felt better. For about 6 days, I felt genuinely fine. On the 7th day, I got home from a shift, and there was another manila envelope wedged in my door. Same kind, inside it a brass key. On the fob, in the same blue ballpoint, 3C. I tried it in my new lock standing right there in the hallway, heart going harder than I want to admit. It turned. Smooth, no resistance, like it had been cut for that exact lock and not the old one. That's the part I have never been able to explain to anyone in a way that satisfies them, including myself. A locksmith had rekeyed that door 6 days earlier. Whoever cut this key had access to the new configuration before I'd told a single person about the change, including the building. I went back to the office that same afternoon, and this time I asked for something specific. I asked who Daniel Ferris was and where he'd gone, because at this point I had connected, rightly or wrongly, this whole situation to him. Gary looked at his screen for a while. Then he told me something the leasing company's own file did not fully explain. Daniel Ferris's tenancy had ended not because he moved out voluntarily, and not because he was evicted through any process Gary could find a record of. The unit had simply been relisted 6 weeks after his last rent payment, with a note in the system that just said, "Unit recovered, condition good, ready to relet." No forwarding address, no security deposit refund on file, paid or withheld. He said in 20-some years, he'd never seen that specific phrasing used for anything else in the building. I moved out at the end of that month. I ate the remainder of the lease, forfeited the deposit, didn't fight it, didn't need the money. That badly compared to what I needed to not be in that hallway anymore. Here's the part I still think about more than anything else. On my last day, boxes already in the car, I went back up one more time to do a final walkthrough with Gary. Standing in the empty living room, I noticed something I'd genuinely never seen before. Even after 4 months of living there, a thin seam in the paint along the baseboard near the closet, where it looked like the wall had been patched at some point and repainted to match. I asked Gary about it. He crouched down, ran a thumb along it, and said it was probably just settling, a common thing in older buildings. Then he said, almost to himself, not really to me, "They patched a lot of units on this side after the renovation?" I asked what renovation. He didn't answer that. He just stood back up, said the walkthrough looked fine, and asked if I had my keys to turn in. I gave him both of them, the original and the one that had shown up twice in an envelope with no note. He dropped them both into the same manila envelope they'd originally come in, wrote 3C on the outside in blue ballpoint. I recognized the handwriting immediately, and I never said anything about it and put it in a drawer with what I assume were dozens of others just like it. I never found out what happened to Daniel Ferris. I looked for a while. There are a few people with that name in the city, and none of them led anywhere. I don't know if he's fine, if he moved across the country and simply never updated a phone bill, or if something happened to him that the building's paperwork was quietly built to not have to explain. What I do know is that somebody somewhere still has a key cut for whatever lock is currently on the door of apartment 3C at the Aldridge. And if the pattern held the way it seemed to be holding for me, they probably always will.